We're good to go? All right. We want to welcome everybody here tonight for our board meeting. Today is March 2nd, 2021. Let's start by indicating who's here. Terry?
Terry Bodden.
Julie Jackson. Nicole McDermott.
Martin Bates, Superintendent.
Connie Burgess.
Chris Wynn.
And Karen Winder. I'm not sure. Do we have Clark Nelson joining us virtually? Clark, are you on?
Clark Nelson is on.
Excellent. Welcome, Clark. Welcome, everybody. We're grateful for those who are here with us in attendance and also for those watching online. We're going to start out tonight with our Pledge of Allegiance. So if Mark Ellermeyer, who's principal of Eisenhower Junior High, if he'll come forward to lead us in the pledge.
Please rise. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much for that. For our reverence this evening, we're going to turn the time over. It's from Eisenhower Junior High Encore Choir. Mark, are you going to come back up and introduce them?
All right, so it is my pleasure to introduce our wonderful Encore Choir at Eisenhower Junior High. We have 35 wonderful students led by our excellent teacher, Emily Rowe. In past years, they have received superior ratings of both district festivals as well as the State Junior High Choir Festival in 2019. Tonight, they will perform The Road Not Taken by Tom Bedke. Lyrics are from the poem of the same title by Robert Frost. Special thank you to Alyssa Longstaff from Westlake STEM, who filmed and edited this performance. Thank you.
I
Mark, please tell them thank you for us.
Will do.
We enjoyed that. That was wonderful and beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll tell
All right, I do not see any mayors in the audience, and we don't have anybody signed up for public comment today, citizen participation. So we're going to move on to the consent items. We, board members have had days to review the fine details that are in the consent agenda. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second on the table to approve the consent agenda. Any questions, concerns, board members? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
I'm sorry. Board members, you just made a couple of appointments. Actually, you made a handful of appointments. 3 of those are open contracts. And we will invite those folks to come meet here when we give them their specific assignment. But there are 2 other positions. And so John, Leslie, did the 2 of you flip a coin about who's going to go first?
you. Let's go first.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Board and Superintendent. Tonight, we're going to name the replacement for Charlene Louie, who's announced her retirement. So as the new Director of Educational Equity, I'd like to present David Gomez. Let me tell you a little bit about Dave really quickly. Dave began his educational career in 1993. He worked for Jordan School District, the Utah State Office of Education. Then he came to Granite in our Educational Equity Department and then served as a principal. From there, he left us and went to Park City as a principal, and then he also served as interim superintendent in the Park City School District. He is now currently at Stansbury Elementary, and we are excited to name him as our Educational Equity Director. Thank you. Oh, Dave, can you introduce your
Yeah.
family?
That's what I was going to say.
Sorry,
Leslie.
thank you.
Just do it here.
Yep.
This is my wife, Noelle. I have 2 of my kids here, Cameron and CJ, and my daughter-in-law, Katie, and my granddaughter, Miley. And so it's good to be here. I'm under my mask. I'm smiling, really excited, passionate about getting equity and access to students, and just love to see what Charlene's done with the Educational Equity Department, and hopefully I can continue to do what her and her staff have done for many years. So thank you to the board and superintendent. Appreciate it.
Thank you. See here either because we're all masked, but we're all smiling along with you. So
Board of Education and Superintendency. As you know, last month we appointed Danny Sterlin to be the principal of Kearns High School, which created an opening in my division in school leadership and improvement for a secondary director. So it's my privilege at this time to introduce to you Steve Prashon, who will be taking that position. As many of you know, he's currently been serving as the principal at Olympus High School and will the remainder of the year. But he started with us here in Granite as a teacher at Benyon Junior High. He then did an internship at Eisenhower Junior High. And then he had the misfortune of working with me as assistant at Cypress. I didn't mess him up too badly. And from there, he went and was the principal of the Jones Center. And then he became the principal at Olympus. And so we're glad to have him. Steve, can you introduce your family?
Yep, with me and I have my 2 daughters. This is Haley, she's age 7, and my daughter Ainsley, and she's age 10. I'm really honored to do this. Thank you very much.
thank you for coming and bringing your daughters with us. That's awesome. Okay, next on our agenda, we're going to skip right into our first action item, which is a first reading of our annual student population reviews. We'll invite Doug. It's a mouthful.
Board members, thank you for having me. Each of you should have in front of you, the flow chart. Recognize, please, that that flow chart is not policy. but it is a communication tool that we will use to kind of break down and summarize this policy in a with a visual to help people kind of understand a little bit better.
This is a parent translation tool of our policy.
There you go.
I think it helps translate for the board too.
Yeah, it's not just, it's good for everybody.
So I'm not sure, honestly, if you received in your packet a red line version of the policy. I can send one out. I just found that out. This policy has been in place for a long time, okay? And what has precipitated me being here tonight and modifying this policy is, or at least asking you to modify this policy, is the fact that there were some changes in state rule and actually in statute requiring some additional notice requirements and directing a little bit more carefully the process if a district or an LEA is planning on changing boundaries, closing schools, that sort of thing. So what I thought I would do is have you kind of step through the visual with me for just a moment, and I will highlight a few of the events that will take place throughout this process, and this will be an annual process that the district will go through along with the board, okay? There's a few months that you need to be familiar with as far as this policy is concerned: February, June, September, and then October, November. February, what we intend each February is that the PAC, the Population Analysis Committee, will develop a list, study list, that will be the basis for analysis for the upcoming school year, or excuse me, for the upcoming calendar year, okay? The board will have an opportunity in February to approve that list and then set the PAC off to do the hard work, okay, that goes into this process. The PAC will do so between the months of February and June. As you can see, in February through May, they'll gather data, gather information, talk to schools, et cetera, et cetera. And in June, they will come back to the board with a initial plan. And that will be a written plan that will include findings and recommendations for potential solutions related to those items that have been listed in the study list, okay? They will, as they go through that process, in your policy, you will note that they can use, the PAC can use appropriate methods, any appropriate methods to gather that data and to go through that analysis. I wanted to point out in subsection D4 that it actually lists the kinds of considerations that the PAC will focus on as they are doing their analysis. And those, as you can see, are, go through anything from the age of our buildings, busing, transportation needs, fiscal considerations, et cetera. That gives the PAC some direction on the kinds of considerations, the kinds of factors that should go into their analysis.
That isn't in any particular order, like.
Alphabetical.
It's in alphabetical order, but yes, not in the.
In importance.
No, it is not exactly. It is not. It is not a prioritized list.
I'm sure you recognize that.
You crossed out alphabetical order. Is there a reason why? I mean,
Just in case we got it wrong. I don't know, honestly.
maybe you should put that back.
We are an educational institution.
Okay, so the PAC will then bring that initial report to the board in June. The board will have an opportunity then to consider it, make any revisions to it, and provide any input that they would like. Once that report has been approved for further study, that's when some of our notice requirements kick in. At that point, we will notice all parents of students that will be affected by any potential changes, any parents that will be indirectly affected because of, in the case of a school closure, for example, the parents of the new school that will be absorbing the school that's being closed, and will also notice to elected municipal leaders in the municipalities where those schools are located. And those are the notice requirements that were put upon or that were written into statute. Okay. The PAC will then do a couple of more, do some additional data gathering at that point. They will conduct open houses, and we will also have a public comment period where the public is encouraged to provide all of their input that they might have for the board. Once that is done, what we have actually written into the policy, and I'm actually going to suggest a change. In October, we plan on October being the date by which all of that data will be gathered. All of that data will be presented to the board, and at that point, a final plan will be presented to the board for what we are calling in the policy board action. Okay, so by October, and we're trying to give ourselves a little bit of extra time before the end of the year for the board to be able to make any additional changes that it needs to make for the final plan.
So are you saying in F2 to change that from November to October? Is that what you're suggesting?
No.
Or
So in F1, where it says, and present it to the board in the fall, we'd felt like that perhaps that putting it by just saying in the fall, that would provide us some maybe needed flexibility. However, I think I put in here 3 different times that the board can adjust the schedule if it's required. And so I think by putting October, it actually provides us kind of a date certain or a month certain that we're at least shooting for each year. So that's why I would recommend that.
For action on first reading, because a first reading really is an action.
Yeah.
But then in November, which was what F2 that you just pointed out, that's when final action would be scheduled.
Yeah.
so do we need to put that in there, or is it just implied because it says board action on F? Do we need to say as a first, as action on a first read?
Yeah, so let me address that. So under F1, it discusses that we will bring the final plan to the board. In that meeting, we're actually required to have a duly noticed public hearing. So that is the month where we would have our public hearing, and the board would then be able to vote on the policy as a first reading in November after the public meeting has occurred. So conceptually, you'd have the public meeting. The board would be able to discuss any other issues that they would like to make any modifications or changes, and then vote on the final plan as a first reading. Okay.
In October.
In October, correct. The following month in November, we'll bring the plan back. If there's been any modifications, just like we modify a policy, for example, if there's been any modifications or anything else, we'll bring that back in November for a second reading, and you have an opportunity to discuss it again at that point, and then vote on it as a second reading. That second reading, just by way of note, must be 120 days after we've given the appropriate notice that we were supposed to have given back in June. So that's why we've chosen those months as targets for the process each year. Okay. Once you've voted on it, you basically vote to either adopt or reject at that point. If the plan is rejected, some of the issues that were in the study plan that were analyzed that year can be carried over to the following year if you'd like to do that. And then we go to implementation. And in the implementation section, I just wanted to note one thing, and that is that we have made a distinction between elementary and junior high school students as opposed to high school students. If high school students if a school is closed or boundaries are changed such that they would be required to attend a different school, we're giving high school students the options to be able to remain in their current school. Junior high school and elementary students, they would automatically be transferred to the new school. They would still have the option to be able to, apply for open enrollment. But for high school students, we're giving them extra consideration because they've only got a year or two left in school. We would allow them to remain at the school that they had been at prior to the change.
Go ahead.
So what about incoming ninth graders? Would you not give them that choice if they, or only the choice if they have like siblings at the school? Or do you know what I'm saying?
I
Like they're
do know.
not already currently at the school, but they might have a sibling there that chooses to stay. So would they
That's right.
automatically be?
So they would go through the open enrollment
Oh,
process. Mhm.
But am I correct in saying that it generally with this is an admin question, but with the open enrollment process, generally you're given preference if you have a sibling at that school?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So-
Yep.
We also look at special programming too for continuity of program. So DLI would get preference as well, just to keep the continuity of program.
Do you have a question, Connie?
Yeah, it's just like with Walker, as that school opened and how many students chose to stay, leaving. So this, as long as they go through the open enrollment, we have to obey. It's not that they can just stay because.
That's right. And this was actually written with that event in mind. The idea being that there was some discussion and it was a difficult process, one for which we didn't really have a stated rule. And so now we've basically put it down in writing so that there is a process. If students want to remain, they go through the open enrollment process. Okay. You're welcome.
And that window just serendipitously starts and goes from December through February.
That's right.
So if the action's taken in November, then people know that means 2 weeks from now, I need to get on the waiting list to transfer over.
That's right. And then in section H, we put in some contingencies, once again, just to make sure that the board has flexibility if it's needed. Contingencies based on the timeline and contingencies based on employing the services of consultants if you would prefer. Just like we have done with our consultant this past year, if that required us to modify the timeline, for example, those provisions allow us the flexibility to be able to do that. So those are kind of the highlights of the policy that steps you through the process each year. I'm happy to respond to any questions as well, or additional questions.
Yes, my question is mostly about the process being a newbie, but I need to know because I believe that we're voting on this as a first reading. Is that right?
That's right.
It looks like this, since I just received the final draft, now that I'm looking at this, it looks like this has been completely rewritten.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Sometimes when we do have when something has been modified significantly, it's a little bit easier to be able to just read the
It is
clean
easier,
draft.
I agree. But my concern is that I'm not sure what I came from.
Mhm.
And so I like this plan, so I'm going to support it. But I'm interested in why the need to change it so much.
I'd be
That's what
happy
I'm
to-
really interested in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to respond to that. So in the previous plan had some definitions that were really actually more confusing than they were helpful.
Mm.
We've removed those definitions. There was also a process of creating school teams, school committees
Mhm.
that actually we didn't really employ ever since we've been putting more emphasis on our school community councils. So that was a fairly significant shift in the policy language. So rather than creating a school committee, we just shifted that and put that responsibility onto community councils.
Okay.
We essentially rethought the considerations that the PAC would use as they were doing their analysis. And so we rewrote that list, as you can see. We added some sections.
Pause for just a second. You
Go
said,
ahead.
as we can see, this is the list. This is the old list.
Yep.
Substantively, I'd suggest that it's not that different, but the terminology's been.
Terminology's
It was more wordsmithing than anything on that
Yeah.
list.
Plus, we also had, I mean, there's legislation that dictates, I mean, there's a lot of requirements.
That's right.
And so.
And so
You
you'll,
had to put that, you had to incorporate that as well. Senator Maine passed a bill.
that's right.
If you look in the bottom corner, you can see that this process, we've actually utilized this process through the most recent school closures and boundary adjustments. But SB 245 elicited a number of new changes and notifications and notices to the community regarding school boundary and closure changes.
I was going to ask that too. This is not new.
The language has been adjusted, but the process is
It's exactly.
Exactly.
the same.
Process and the timeline, the same.
It's identical. In fact, we just.
everything
in the
actually just
language.
moved up about a month.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add to the changes? I
Yeah,
didn't mean
so
to interrupt on
a
that.
couple of the other changes in the initial report, we had kind of gone through these machinations of saying that we were going to create a strategy and that strategy was going to be then discussed. And we just kind of got rid of some of those kind of analytical hurdles that we had created for ourselves. And we just said, we're going to develop a report. You can, the board can analyze that report, make modifications to that report, et cetera, et cetera. We'll post that report. The report will then be, after it's been posted, the public will have an opportunity for public notice, or for public comment. That was actually added to the policy, a public comment period. We wanted to be able to provide further opportunities for the public to be able to provide their input, further
Mhm.
touches with the community. We left in the open house provision because that really becomes a very effective tool for communicating with our patrons.
Mhm.
But we divided those out. And then on board action, you'll notice in section G, we actually, because of the simplification of that process, we were able to eliminate a section called development of recommendation solutions, which again was that analytical process that actually I felt like was more confusing than helpful. And some of that was from revisions that I had made with the board just a couple of years previously.
Mhm.
So we simplified that. We eliminated that section. We created the public hearing process, the two-step reading process, made those explicit, and then added some additional contingencies just for flexibility
Right.
and to allow the board to be able to make some additional changes if needed. So those are the main areas of change. I know it seems a very red line. It seems like there's a lot of changes. I would say those changes were made around the edges and not to the core substance of the policy
Well,
itself.
especially if this is essentially the same, then
That's
that,
right.
that really says a lot about what happened there.
Exactly.
And I'm, by the way, I'm not concerned about making huge amounts of changes to policies. Sometimes that needs to happen. So I'm not afraid of those major changes. I did want to say, on B2,
Mhm.
when we talk about the Population Analysis Committee, it says it's a committee of district employees with expertise in these things. Like, who would be on that committee?
That's a great question. So these are the individuals who are currently on it. Ben?
Transportation, special education. We have some of our school leadership and improvement directors. Who am I missing, Don?
Curriculum.
The boundary and,
Steve,
have
isn't
folks
Steve
that
Hogan?
sit in from.
Steve Hogan.
yeah, our boundaries.
Communications.
So curriculum specialists when needed, information system specialists when needed to help us pull data
GIS specialists, et cetera. So it's the technocrats that fit the school of discussion. So if you're at the elementary level, it's elementary slids and et cetera. If you come up to secondary, then you build the team according to the boundary under discussion.
Especially if there's construction issues and some of those more specialized issues, then we pull in people from those areas.
I would also point out, we do have a member of the PTA who represents the community on that committee as well.
So the majority of those people are district personnel. I just want to make sure in my mind that that makes sense. And I guess it does, because if you're in the building, you're pretty biased. I mean, is that the theory
If you're
behind that? or-
Actually,
That's,
really good
that's,
point. Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And
And-
if you live in the neighborhood around the building, you're just as biased.
Yeah,
So the time for the bias to be, for those, for the
Filtered.
bias hounds to be
Yeah.
released
Yeah.
is in those
Public
comment
hearings,
periods and the
yeah.
open houses.
That's right.
That's
And-
when,
And through the use of the school community council that's written in here as well. So they have a vehicle for their voice as part of the process.
But your point's well taken in that we're trying to just provide kind of the objective experts in those areas to create the study list, but then recognize that that study list itself can be revised. It folds itself into an initial report, which can then be revised into the final plan, which can be then revised. And we're going to allow all of these individuals who have opinions and, perhaps differing viewpoints, several opportunities to be able to voice those. And
to not just voice them, but also opportunity to be heard.
Exactly,
Right? I
right.
mean,
I think it's really important as part of this process. If you look at the meetings that are held in that February to May timeframe, especially those open houses, we really want to go out into those communities and let them know this is what the issue is that we're facing here. We're not telling you what the answer is. We're not telling you what the problem is or what our solution is. We just want you to see the issue. Now you tell us what you think. And so we develop, based on the public feedback, potential solutions to bring to you into the month of June on that initial report. Then we go through that finalizing process after that public feedback process.
okay. And I really feel like it's a huge deal to involve that PTA member. I think that's a really important thing. I was glad that that was on the list. So I'm assuming that this means that since it's March 2nd, that we will not have a boundary study this year,
that's correct.
correct? Okay.
Mhm.
We are, however, receiving information from Davis.
Right.
Davis demographics.
Davis demographics.
Right.
That's right.
And I will say that, yeah, if a boundary study was required, based on what you learned from Davis demographics, the flexibility that we built into the policy would allow you to have a boundary study of some kind. But our intention was that this would start next
Yeah.
year, the calendar year.
Come next October, you'll remember, we talked about this just a few months ago. Come next October, we'll have a better idea of what population actually looks like. Trying to make population-based decisions with what we've got right now just
Yeah.
didn't make sense.
I just wanted to make sure I
Yes.
was
you're
right on that. Thank you for all my questions.
Nicole.
I have something. So having been through this, I noticed on here that you did put it, but I highlighted this on the policy. On here, it says that you hold public meetings, but the public meetings aren't actually mentioned until the September in our policy. I just, like I say, having gone through this with the school and having it been a very hot issue, some of the feedback that I got was parents said, we feel like we've been blindsided by this. We need to have more, we needed to have more notification. So I'm just wondering in that D section, if we can explicitly say we will be having a public meeting, or that somehow they're going to be notified at the beginning of this process as well, because there were a lot that said they felt like, but because if we do it just by the end of the study by September, they feel like, okay, they're taking this to October. At what point are we going to change that? They need to feel like they have a voice in that February through May. And Also, the other point is that they bring that to us in June, which a lot of them said, it feels like most of what we did was during the summertime, which is when there's
Sure.
not a lot of communication with parents. Is that a problem to move that up instead? Well, let me find it. Where it is.
Oh, I'm
Except they've
following
already
you.
met with the school community councils by that time.
Right.
So
but-
is it up to the schools to let them know that?
That's my question. Is it up to the schools or can we hold an open house at that point to make sure they know? I feel like I don't want anybody to come back to us and say, you
Yeah.
didn't give us notification. And because like in E, we have, it says in June,
Right.
the initial report will be represent, but
So-
in June, they're all on vacation.
Yeah, so let me ask you to look at D3 and maybe suggest some language there. So in consultation with the board, the PAC may use appropriate methods to gather data and conduct analysis, including but not limited to interviewing employees, patrons, and other school community stakeholders, meetings with school community councils and local elected officials, engaging consultants and commissioning studies, and conducting surveys and focus groups. In that paragraph or somewhere in that area, would it be helpful for us to
put a
some
community.
sort of community communication?
Yeah, I just feel like we need to have some sort at the beginning of this, just to make sure. I don't know. Ben, you got a lot of, I'm sure, the hate mail too.
I actually agree with what you're saying, and I think we have that in the spirit. We did not delineate that verbiage. The idea is to have those community meetings before school gets out, and so people have a pretty good idea that we're taking, when we go out to those community meetings, these are all the possibilities of the things that we're looking at. We have not made any decisions, but we wanted your feedback. And so by the time we actually get to that process, also, if you look down a little bit further, I don't remember where this is at, Doug, but on that final recommendations coming into the fall, when we go out to those meetings again in September, we actually plan on launching those for a 60-day public review. So we will start publicizing in August what those final recommendations are, and then giving 60 days of opportunity for public feedback online and in person.
Sure, and I read that part of it. Like I say, my concern, and it's on here.
That
it's
we're
on-
not front loading it,
it's on
right?
this.
Do you-
We're just-
Let me make sure I understand what, because I had to squint to read this through, but I think it says, no, yeah, a little, thanks, Karen, for your help there. This says, meet with school community councils and host community meetings, is what it says in green. What in D, I don't see and host community meetings. Now, three might mean hosting community
Right.
meetings, but it doesn't say it.
concludes to
No, I will
that.
tell you that it was actually in there and we removed it and I
Oh,
could,
did you?
and I
Okay.
could replace it is what,
I just-
that's why I directed your attention to 3.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I just feel like it needs to be said because, well, I know Ben's gonna do it, if Ben isn't with us forever, this is a policy and maybe the next person is not gonna have the spirit of that in there,
Yep.
so.
That feels like something should ought to go back in.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of time left here. I
Because
just
we
want
had
to
a
be
lot of
really
people.
clear.
We had a lot of people who were quite upset, felt like they were.
Yeah, they
felt like were
really felt like they were blindsided by
Almost
that.
as if we could send something out in that December, February period that
So,
your school is on a study list.
yeah, I was
Ain't
just,
affected By boundaries.
I was just gonna ask that, Terry, remind me the month that we approve the actual study.
The actual studies will now be done in February.
So,
Well, that's
Could
the
we-
study list.
right, so
Mhm.
as soon as we take action and it's approved that we are saying, yeah,
Study
Kate
list.
Pack committee, let's go. Can we notify anybody on those individual studies?
Well-
I know we can't tackle them all at once, but just to make sure, hey, this process has started, we're
Right.
looking at you.
I'm texting Steve Hogan here at the same time. He's listening to this meeting. I would just reiterate the fact that I think we do want to make sure we have opportunity to visit with the principal and the school community council first, talk about that process, and then open it up to but I agree that we have learned a lot in the midst of this process, and we'll continue to beef up communications on the
Even
front
if
end.
the notification goes out in March, I mean, that's.
Well, that's
still
what should,
Better.
that's what
Perhaps-
should be happening in that 4-month window.
Right.
And I
And
think
perhaps
what
I
I'm
make a
hearing-
recommendation that we could put in between 2 and 3.
What section?
We're talking about D,
D.
2 and
D.
3. that we put an additional paragraph that says something to the effect after, principals and school community councils have been notified, communications office will also.
No, we just need to make sure there's proper notice to the regular community of just the study list component, and it would include something to this effect
Okay.
of reminding them that no decisions have been made, but this is what our process is and this is where we're at in it.
Yep.
I don't know why we have to wait till principals and community councils have been advised. If it's affecting the whole school, why can't we just send something to every?
We can.
Well, we could do it almost simultaneously, right?
Yeah, I think
Once
that's
you've
a-
approved that study
Yeah,
list.
once we've approved it, I just hate to see people feeling like they got blindsided,
Yeah.
which happened last time.
I guess the reason part of that too is because not every community council is highly effective.
That's right. Yep.
Is that a good way to put it?
With respect to that, I would remind this body that we did hold public meetings in May, and we invited, this sounds cliche, everybody and their dog. We householded the notification, so every taxpayer in that region actually got an invitation to come to those meetings, and we did
Right.
the same in the fall as well.
Right, but you remember also that year we got out like on the 24th of May. So it kind of got buried under things, and that's not your fault by any means.
It's just a
It's just
end of
that-
the year, and
Yeah.
yep,
So that's why I just wonder if we can move it up, the timeline up just a little bit so that we're not.
sure.
You've
Oh,
got
yeah,
that,
I like
you got from February, March, April, right? You've got all of that time to provide publicity regarding the study list. Now, the concern is that once you start advertising the study list, that people are going to assume that there are decisions that have already been made or being made about the items that are on that study list. And so it'll be incumbent upon us to communicate that these are the things that are being considered for analysis, and that's all. Because that I fear might get lost in translation a little
Well,
bit.
And I think communication is going to be key on that it's a boundary study. We're not going to label something as an automatic closure because it very well may not end up in closure. And this is something, board, we're going to be up against. I mean, we could be the best communicators. We can have the perfect timeline. And people, when you talk about boundaries and closures, even if we have the best policy and process in the world, we have to realize there's still going to be some people that are a little, angry with us and our choices. I will say though, a lot of us have been through this up here and it is hard, but I've personally seen a study where at the beginning of the study, I think one thing, and then after going through this very process, hearing from the public, I've ended at a different conclusion. And so realize too, for all of our teachers and principals and families and students that are listening in right now, the study is literally a study for the board too. We're taking all of this, we are literally analyzing all of this data. We're receptive to feedback and everything. And then with our knowledge and our understanding, we're going to have to come together to make a decision. But I just want to reiterate that we need to communicate it's a study and we are looking at all facets of something and we're not predetermining anything because I personally have witnessed it where, we think one thing and then by the end of the year, it's different.
Right. And hopefully that's the point of a process. The point of the process is not to, is not to backfill your prior decisions. The point of the process is actually to have an open process that allows for that free flow of information, right? And allows the board to make decisions that are best for their constituents, best for our students.
And I would just like to say thanks because I know that Steve and Don and Ben, as they go out, they truly have done the very best to get people informed. But just like you said, sometimes we don't think it's until at the very end, then we know how important it is. So thanks to everyone in the past trying to get people informed as early as possible. We've done it for years and I know that you have tried so hard. Appreciate that.
So my only other concern, I just go back to this in E1 where we have in June, the initial report. Is May going to be too, that might be a Steve question. Is May going to be too early? Can we do it in May so that it does happen before school gets out? and we
Do
can,
what in May? You're talking about community,
The initial report,
initial report.
having
Okay.
that presented to the board in May, is that?
That may feel a little rushed to our community. I would tell you the goal in our discussions has always been having those meetings in the April timeframe and as early potentially as March. I know we tried to actually set, we did have a few of those in April and a few in May, just by virtue of schedules and being able to put that together on short notice.
Yeah, because that was again part of that feedback that they said, hey, you sent out these emails and you noticed us and this is 60 days, but it all happened in June, July. We're not looking at our email for school stuff. So I guess that's just why I wonder, is that going to time crunch the pack too much to try to get that done in May?
I think we would be struggling to get, especially if we're in a large study. On that last one, we went through a kind of a 2-year phase on that. And then trying to put those meetings together, we still ran up against some obstacles, but that's certainly something we could consider.
And let me just,
I just was saying you're already meeting with the school community councils during April and May, right? So if the schools tried to push out and say, look, this is what the meeting, including in the meeting to their patrons, then June probably would be okay, because depending on how many schools are involved, I know you work so hard to get those SCC meetings.
Yeah, well,
in
you're
April
going
and
around to
May.
each of the different schools that are impacted. I would just point out too, though, the final recommendation coming in June, getting publicized out in the August, September timeframe with opportunity to come again to another meeting in the September timeframe after everybody kind of comes back from everything and is a little bit less distracted. I worry that if we move it up too far, that gap, people will forget that it's actually the same study that we've been discussing.
and conceptually, I might add that, if we got after it, as soon as the board approved something in February, you would approve it at the board meeting in February, typically, which would be the first part of February. You would have the whole month of February, March, and April to really kind of do that communication blitz that you're talking about, right? And so simultaneously, the PAC would be able to do the work that's required to develop an initial report. But that would be done, as I say, simultaneously to all of this communication that should be taking place, like you've suggested, before the end of the school year. So just because the initial report is written, and I'm not married to this, I'm only saying it because to help think through it conceptually. But it's the June initial report almost is the outcome of what occurred in February, March, and April.
Sure. And maybe I'm not articulating it well, and it's just that the feedback was, well, you made your decision, and we said, no, we notified you in June, July, and August, and, solicited feedback, but they're like, we're not paying attention in June, July, and August. So that means we don't give feedback till September, which that's when you've pretty much decided. And so that's just, I don't know how to resolve that.
Well, it's a little, here's my take. We have to conduct our board business in June and July and August. We can't take those 3 months off. We have to continue to study. I am sensitive to that because we did go through the process, and you know what, we can be better. We're always looking for improvement and improving our steps along the way. Where June isn't, it's not a public hearing. It's basically a compilation of the feedback we're gathering in the spring. I have to say, some of the best meeting turnouts we had were in May. So I worry about bumping it the up to the first part in May and letting, that's a little bit rushed for the PAC, but I also think in May, people are kind of, it's warmer outside. They're going to be more willing to come out to meetings. In our boundary study last time, we had a lot of significant meetings in May with a pretty good turnout. So I would hate to, I think more people are going to come out in May than February.
I think I would just remind you too, that we've tried to make this as flexible as possible. The June timeframe is used and built in accordance with SB 245 and state statute on setting that. You cannot make these recommendations any later than this. And so technically speaking, we could, as soon as we get done with all that public feedback process, we've really alerted them to the study and some of the things that we're considering. We can push that out as soon as it could be May, is my point. But we don't necessarily need to adjust the policy to reflect that. I think the goal from the PAC is always going to be to get that done sooner than later.
So maybe in the policy then, instead of saying in June, or can it say in June or before, or in June or earlier?
Or maybe we could go back
At
to
the
the
latest
spring.
by
At the
June.
latest by June?
No later than June.
No later
The-
than
I'm not
June.
great at writing beautiful
Uh-huh.
words like that, so.
I'm just
something
saying,
make that pretty.
I think June is not a final decision by any means.
Right.
It's a
Sure,
presentation.
Like I say,
I get the
it's just more
concern.
the parents, that was just the feedback that
Yeah.
I got, that
I also think that they get notification that it's going to be on the agenda in May. And like the school doesn't get out until really we've done our first board meeting in June, right? Actually, we only have one board meeting in June. It's the first one, right? So
Yeah,
it's
and it's
still
later
kind
in
of
June, but-
connected. Oh, is it?
It's mid-June.
Oh,
right.
okay, then that's not. Never mind.
But here's the deal
Cancel.
too, is when we're meeting with community councils, we can be very open. We know our board meeting schedule at the beginning of every year. So that's something that maybe we can include in the presentation is,
Yeah. it's all about
hey, it needs to
communication.
be, because I think we can solve this with communication. So when we're going around to those open houses, as maybe Ben or Steve, whoever, Don, whoever's walking through the process, when you get to that June box, that June rectangle here smack in the middle of the paper, you can say, yeah, and for your information, board meeting is June, blah, blah, at 7 PM, where this will be on the agenda.
Yeah, and I would,
And at the very
again,
least,
it's
they
already
know.
been stated. I think it's important to reiterate. We have gone through this once before, but there is plenty of room for improvement, and there will be after we go through it again and again. And it's just something that it's not an easy thing to do. And there's always going to be opportunities to improve.
I move that we accept the annual student population analysis procedures with the addition of notifying the schools affected, the whole school community in that February timeframe or whenever the
When the
list,
study list is finalized.
when the list is finalized, somehow putting it that way.
And adding in, are we adding in also the having community meetings in number 3?
The actual verbiage for.
The verbiage for that.
And did you want on F1 to add in the October instead of the fall? You spoke to that.
Yeah, again, just so that we can make it a month certain.
With
That is,
flexibility,
that
but
is-
you had just mentioned to kind of
Right.
have a target, because I
Yeah.
think it's good to at least have a target, because we have full ability
yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
flexible.
that's up to the board. I just, as we thought about it after we had sent it
Just
to
as we're
you,
going through our little amendments with this.
I think I would recommend that, so that you do have kind of a month that's a target month.
So
So however you write that,
Okay,
that's my motion.
So basically, there's some work in section D and some work in F.
D
So-
and F.
So can we say that, okay, Terry, you made a motion to approve the annual student population review. Can we just say that with changes in
Amendments, yeah.
section, with amendments to
As
section
discussed.
F and D?
Yep.
D and F?
What-
is that
I
fair?
don't know. Yeah. I'm fine with that.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Oh, no, sorry.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the first reading of our annual student population review with the amendments Doug will work on section D and F and bring back for a second reading next month. Do you have what you need, Doug?
Sorry, one additional thing. Do you
Okay.
want no later than June added, or do you want to just keep it in June?
I would prefer to say no later than June, but I don't know what.
That's not up to me. That's up to y'all. So.
Board?
No later than June, sounds good. No later
Sounds
than-
good.
than-
Why don't you bring that back in a second reading? And if
Bring
we
it
have a
back
change
in-
of heart, we'll let you know.
Okay, very good. I'll do that.
Yep. Okay, so we have a motion, a second.
Can
Oh.
you repeat the motion?
No, I don't think I can. It's on the table, Terry. Thanks a lot. All right, any questions or concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we still have Clark?
I said aye.
Okay, good. I didn't
Good.
hear. Any opposed? Perfect. Motion passes unanimous. Thanks.
Board, thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
That was a tough one, but I appreciate you working through it with me.
And I
Thank
just
you.
want to say, it's
Great
really,
job on that.
it's really important. This policy board and this process becomes critical when we do start dropping school names, because then it becomes personal. And so for us to fully back this process and this policy is going to help us navigate pretty hard things that we, that we're looking at. So thanks for, your great questions
And a
tonight.
good process will back you too.
Yes.
Right.
So,
for sure.
yeah,
It protects everybody, right?
thanks.
Okay, we are on to our superintendent report. Martin.
Thank you. I've just got one item, and that's board members. There have been conversations about test to sway, and the state health department, the director of the state health department issued some guidance regarding dances and similar student activities. What John is passing out are guidelines that we've written. John, is this all three or just the high school? So you'll see some high school, some junior high, and some elementary guidelines. We will be giving this to the administrators tomorrow. The administrator meeting is tomorrow, but we'd invite you to look these over, and they're very similar. John, I don't know that you need to take, I reverse the order, so the high school one's on top. And look through that if you would, and then
Yeah, so the reason we want to start with the high school is because it's more comprehensive. Obviously, there are far more activities that take place in the high schools than in the other two settings. So what we discussed as a committee, one of the challenges that we have obviously is to do some of these activities based on the new guidelines, you need to test the students 48 hours prior to the activity. So for example, prom.
within 48 hours.
Yeah, within 48 hours. So let's just take prom, for example. If we're going to do a prom, all of the students would need to be tested within 48 hours of that dance. So there's also what we have to take into consideration is the number of tests that we have and the personnel to run all the students through the testing. So we believe, talking with the secondary directors and as a committee, that there will probably be approximately 3 major activities that most high schools will want to do between now and the time school ends. One of them probably being a prom. There might be a junior prom and a senior prom, so that would be 2. And then obviously, like at the end of the year type of senior activities that you do. That's why we put on here 3 activities. For school dances and other activities, we mentioned that you need to have proof of a negative COVID-19 test. We stipulated the time frame, and that we believe that what will typically happen is proms or those school dances are usually calendared for Saturdays, and so they could do the testing on Fridays, which is also a distance learning day, which is when you have most of your staff available to do the testing. Okay. But the participants may test at the school site, or they can also go to an alternative site. There are some folks that if they couldn't make it to the school, they could also run to the Maverick Center and receive a test or one of the other testing sites. Participants must bring a copy of the results to enter the event. We've been talking a little bit about the logistics, and we believe what will work nicely, and we didn't put it in here, but we're going to talk about it logistically with the principals, is the students can get a wristband once they've been tested, but there will also be a list at the door, where they take the tickets and so forth. So if a student were to for some reason, which they probably won't lose them because they're like the ones that they get at some of the other activities that they go to, like a Boondocks or something where it sticks on there and they'll be able to keep it. And then, but if they were to lose it for whatever reason, we'll have a list of the students that were tested it, and so they can get in. If they, just so you guys know some of the details, They can invite students that don't attend their school, because a lot of these teenagers, a lot of the high school students will ask someone that's not necessarily a student at their same school. The other students that are attending, whether it be within our district or another district, they can come get tested at our sites, or they can get tested at one of these other sites that are mentioned. And then the other option could be proof of a COVID-19 vaccination, which is more for the adults. So like the adults that will be chaperoning the activities. Some will be our own staff, obviously, but there are parents that may wish to help. And the parents can also come and get tested as well if they'd like to, if they haven't been vaccinated. We do believe that we will have parents that will be vaccinated though. Obviously, each week that goes by, we get more and more vaccines out. There are parents that might be in law enforcement or in the healthcare industry or in education themselves that have already been vaccinated. And so they can just show us their card. Or if they have proof of the fact that they have had COVID, which somebody might say, well, how do you have that? Well, once you get tested and you're positive, it goes into the REDCap system or another system, or your doctor will be able to indicate that you've had it.
Is
Mask or
that within a certain time frame that you've had COVID? Like, is it good for 90 days?
90 days, yeah, 90 days.
Oh, let me read.
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't following.
Yeah, it's 90 days. It's also what, that's actually stipulated now in the handbook too. Yeah, that's under C.
I see it.
Yep.
Sorry, I can read.
That's okay. We're going to continue to ask that masks be worn at all activities, similar to what we do in school. Outside venues can be utilized. There was some question or debate as to whether they should all be held at the school or if they could rent a facility. Obviously, that will depend on the facilities and their guidelines as well. We have to follow whatever guidelines they have in place, but we do believe there are venues out there that will allow our high schools to rent the facilities as long as we're showing that we're following protocols. So, that's why we need to get this information out fairly quickly, because we know that there are
Venues being reserved.
venues being reserved, yeah, and student body officers, they put a lot of work into these events. And then chaperones, we just indicated under 4 that they're going to need to provide similar proof as our students. We talk about pictures with regards to food. Oh, with pictures, what we said is they can have their pictures taken. They can remove their mask long enough to take a picture and then put it back on. Some of them might, just for the fun of it, have pictures taken both ways, just to remember. I know that COVID's not fun, but they'll be able to say someday, yeah, that was my COVID prom or whatnot.
We did that as a board.
Yeah, there you go. Food, well, it will be something we look back at years from now. We're not laughing now, but someday we might. Food and water will be allowed, but what we're asking is that they have single servings of like water or refreshments, and then prepackaged food items. And then when they're eating, obviously they can remove their mask, but when they're done eating, they need to put their mask back on. Similar to what we do like right now with lunches and so forth. DJs are required to wear masks. Schools cannot charge participants for the cost of the COVID test. We've got supplies actually here at the district, which is great. We also talk about so some of the activities in the back. We talk about awards programs and parent nights. Obviously, all of our high schools have traditions of doing awards nights for the students at the end of the year. And so we thought through that as well. What we've asked them to do though is follow the similar guidelines that we have right now, where they should be choosing a venue where they know what the capacity of the venue is, and they need to keep about 25% capacity. So for most of those activities, it'll be parents only, because that's about all they'll be able to accommodate. They can do team banquets and as well. With that, we do believe that the question we oftentimes get is, can they have a banquet like for food? They can't for the students, because the students are tested frequently. And if they were having an event like this, especially teams, because teams get tested every 2 weeks, or not just teams, but also the performing arts. And then they could do the awards portion of it like they could take the students from perhaps the cafeteria into the auditorium, and then parents can join them for the awards portion of it. It's going to be difficult to feed and do parents in the same venue, especially since they're not tested, and so forth. Then we talk about assemblies as well in there. And that just basically follows the similar guidelines as far as the capacity, knowing where the entrance and exits are, and doing social distancing. And then we just cite the guiding documents, the school manual and the COVID-19 business manual. So that's the high schools. Did you look at the other two?
Hey,
You can
John,
see
we
that
have a
they're not.
question real quick.
Sure.
Sorry. So two things. I noticed that it doesn't say on the dances part, the whole 25% thing. Is there a reason why that was omitted? Like,
Yeah, because actually with that, because of the fact that we're doing the testing within a 48-hour window, we don't have to necessarily hit the 25% on that. What's gonna really determine that is the venue and the guidelines that the people that are renting the venue to us set.
Okay. So
And they're
following
probably
that.
gonna be following the business manual that's outlined at the bottom.
Okay. The other question I had was just about assemblies. If it's involving only students during the day, are we keeping our classrooms at 25%? And if we're not, why is it that we have to keep the assembly like in our auditoriums to 25%? Is there a reason for that?
That basically this the current guideline within the manual, the COVID manual, and that's what we've been following.
That's what the manual says about assemblies.
Yeah,
So-
it's what they've been saying right now. Now the other thing we can do with assemblies, or what they encourage, is to break them up. So you don't have to do, like, for example, you could do with the high school, you can do multiple assemblies, but you can do the same thing in the elementaries and do grade levels. Like you could do a lower grade level and an upper grade level and so forth. But you're right, we don't meet that same guideline within the classroom.
But
And
even,
that's
I
been
guess
fine.
I'm just thinking like, and I didn't read fully the elementary one, but like elementaries, even if you break them up, lower grades and upper grades, you're still gonna exceed 25% capacity in that, like in your
You can't-
cafeteria.
Yeah, you can in your multipurpose room, and that's why you might want to do it by grade. So it depends on the size of the school and their facilities.
Okay, I just,
It will-
I just wonder what the justification of that is if we're not holding to that in our classrooms itself. Why are they so strict on that, but we're not, if we're wearing
Right,
masks?
Right. I think optimally, they would love it if we could do 25% in a classroom, but they just know we can't do that. That's not possible. It's just
Yeah,
not
okay.
feasible.
Just
Espe-
wondering.
I'm
Especially,
wondering if it's just the mass amount of people too. I mean, in a classroom, I would imagine that it's.
Part of
that
it
it's
is the number
related
of-
to
the number of
numbers,
people, the large
keeping group
groups.
size
Yeah.
lower, because even in a crowded classroom.
well, and the other thing about the
It's a
classroom
finite
though
number.
is with the classroom, we assign specific seating, and there's the protocols that we have in place for sanitizing periodically, where in a larger space that doesn't happen as frequently.
Sure.
So-
I just am kind of trying to figure this out because like, for example, having a concert with the choir, if your 25% capacity is, you have a 500 seat hall, so your capacity is 125 and you have 75 kids up on the stage, that means you get 75 kids to see the thing, that's just, it limits that so much more.
Yes, it does. And if it gets adjusted, because we, as we've learned, and the reason I'm looking at Karen and Martin is because they're on a weekly call with the health department. If that gets adjusted, we'll adjust it as well.
Okay.
We're just going basically off what they've been telling us. And so far, I mean, I'd have to say our results have been really good. And with the
Sure.
fact that we've been in face-to-face instruction as much as we have.
Yeah.
So,
No, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to,
yeah, I know. Sometimes you kind of
Help
wonder
justify that
what
for-
sets these
Yeah.
guidelines and these
okay,
protocols.
thanks, John.
You bet. So the other thing that we mentioned both in the junior high and in the elementary is PTSA and parent volunteers. Because we know that there will be, in the end of the year activities, parents that want to help out. And so we just mentioned in those that that they can be used to help supervise outdoor activities such as field days, but masks must be worn properly at all times. And the nice thing about the field days is since they happen outside, there is more room for spreading out. And in some of our outdoor activities, we've actually, for example, like soccer, if the family is sitting together on their own, they've been able to remove their masks. So we know it's safer outdoors than it is indoors. Staff or parent volunteers that have had the opportunity to be vaccinated should be used for activities held indoors or when social distancing is prohibited. What we're indicating is, luckily for us, we were able to have each school send some volunteers through our process to get vaccinated. And so they each have done that. And some of those volunteers may be the very ones that they use in situations where perhaps they're not an outdoor activity, but they're inside or in a smaller contained area. Does that make sense? And then, of course, if parents or PTA members have vaccine cards and they can show them, they would be great to use in those situations as well. So we're encouraging end of the year activities and intramurals and performing arts in the junior high. The only difference between the junior high and the high school is we won't be doing the test within 48 hours. And so we are going to basically encourage the same practices that we're doing through the school day with mask wearing, social distancing, the sanitizing and so forth. That we have received new guidelines as far as when a student is performing, they can remove their mask long enough to sing a song or do a solo, and then put it back on when they're doing something close with another student. Does that make sense?
But do they have to do the test to play? type
They are.
thing?
We're actually doing that every 2 weeks with our kids in the junior high as well. We're not doing it within 48 hours, but we're doing it
Every 2 weeks in
every
the
2
junior
weeks.
high?
Yes.
You just mentioned choir. I just want to follow up on that real quick. So let's say you're at a choir concert at a secondary school. If they're doing the test to play, can they sing without masks?
It depends. Yes, if they're it depends on how they're spaced and what it is that they're doing. But yes, if they're being tested every 2 weeks, they
If
can
you're
take it down.
Standing on the bleachers, singing a song.
Yes, and we're gonna get clarity with the high school principals tomorrow, because
Okay.
we found that some are and some are not. doing
Yeah,
that, so.
that concern has come to me in question. So when you mentioned choirs, I was like, oh, I'm gonna
Yes.
follow up on that.
Yeah, part of this is that the fact that as we talked to our principals at the beginning of the year, was being flexible and that much of this is fluid, it's sometimes hard to get the information out to everybody that needs it quickly. So sometimes it even gets to the principals, but it may not have gotten to all of the advisors yet. So
I
we're
understand.
working
There's
on
a
it.
lot of information coming
Yeah.
throughout this whole year. So I understand some little, blips.
We're going to
happening.
talk through some of that in our meeting tomorrow, because we want to see that we're being at least consistent within our district. Now, we know that other districts might be doing things somewhat different, but that's because everybody sets their own guidelines and policies. Some are following the health guidelines more strictly and some a little looser, you could say. So, all right. Does that make sense?
Just a broad question. Where can parents, students, and families, where can they find this information? Are we posting it on our website?
We can. We haven't yet because we just developed it, but we can do that.
Okay,
bet.
before you do it, on the junior high one, PTSA section, number 1, can you fix your typo so it says filled days instead of filed days?
You bet.
Thanks.
That's a good reason why.
And it's on
the elementary one too.
Sure, we'll fix them both. You bet.
Because I would love, because you can imagine, at least I know Nicole and I are, and I'm sure others are, there's a lot of questions regarding these dances and the senior breakouts and
Yep.
those kind of, I've had questions about banquets and awards nights. And so I'm fine sharing information, but it would be really nice to be able to direct them to read this
Sure.
in its entirety. So,
Yep. We could even have them posted on each of their websites. So,
Perfect.
Thank you.
yep. All right. Thanks for catching that typo.
That's all that's all I have. Actually, John, on the high school 1-5,
Uh-huh.
Oh, did I miss one?
it should say choose, not chose, but
Okay.
that's all I have this evening.
Good catch.
And you
Good
actually saw that one,
call.
Martin, so.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Proofreading.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
I'll read it backwards.
All right, we're going to move now on to board reports. Let's actually start with Clark. Are you still with us?
I'm still with you, hopefully.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I'll be very brief. I had the chance to go catch Aladdin at Granite Park Junior High last month, which was terrific. The other thing I would mention is that our audit committee is off and running, and I think everybody knows there could not be a more thrilling or even some might say exciting committee for this board. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Clark. And Clark's a great chair of that committee, by the way. Let's go over to Chris.
Okay, thanks. I also got to attend the Aladdin Junior at Granite Park Junior High. It was so cute. Those students worked so hard and they did such a good job, and it was great to see them perform. I got to attend the Cypress Much Ado About Nothing play, which they did an excellent job. It was so good. They set it to an 80s theme. It was really fun to see Shakespeare in the 80s. So that was great. The other thing I've really been impressed with is I've been helping with the Cypress Test to Play every other week. And man, that's such an effort on our school's part that they are doing this for our students. They, it's our secretaries, it's our social workers, it's our counselors, and all the, some of the coaches help. And it's really cool to see that process that they're working so hard to make sure these kids get to do something normal this year. And so I appreciated that so much. And I appreciate they let me come and help them do that and see them in that role. It's so fun to see a counselor doing a test instead of just, in their office. And so I don't think they probably realize how much we appreciate that, but I appreciate that and seeing them take that role and responsibility on to do that for our students. And with that, I just want to make sure I appreciate our teachers so much. The more and more I see this year go through, our teachers, I think our Lieutenant Governor made a comment at our board meeting that our teachers are doing the heavy lift right now, and they are doing the heavy lift, but I think that goes to include all staff and anyone working in schools right now. And then the district offices they're doing the heavy lift, and they're doing such a good job. So thank you.
So I was able to go to Granite Park's Aladdin also. It was very good. And the Adams family at Taylorsville. And I was very grateful that they test so that the kids could go without their masks, and you could understand the words they said and they sang, and it was very good. I also, as I reviewed the SSAP plans, for the elementary, I saw what a hit the kids took, especially the kindergartners to those first grade. And I really hope that finances can help those schools and help those kids. It's really hard to see how many are in that intensive now. So we'll just keep working and trying to help them out.
Terry.
Yeah, just one report that we had our last JLC meeting and it was wonderful. Appreciate the district hosting for our superintendents and any board members. I do think those board members who chose not to come here missed out on a great opportunity to, I really appreciate listening to the superintendent.
I was doing Test to Play, just like.
No, I know that. I'm just saying, I think from other schools.
You mean from other
You're talking
districts?
JLC board
He's
members.
not calling
forgiven,
y'all
Terry.
out, okay?
Sorry. I'm done. No. Other districts and board members of other districts, I think, missed out. It was really great to listen to these superintendents, and I don't know who they are, where they're all from, but to listen to their comments, I appreciate the efforts that our superintendent and his staff, what they go through to help us be as good as we are. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Hear about that. It was really interesting to listen to all those superintendents and learn from them, especially because sometimes you think you have great perspective and then it's sort of broad. And then I feel like this last 2 months has just been one big broadening of my perspective anyway. But I have absolutely been so impressed. I've been trying to attend a lot of PTA and community council meetings. First starting within my precinct, and I hope to do so outside of my precinct soon too. But just the level of dedication and, of so many people trying to participate on whatever, in whatever way they can. And I've been really inspired by it. I've also been really inspired by our students and their resilience. And I think that we're going to see really great things come of this group of kids. And it has inspired me to do a little bit of research about this generation that they're calling Gen Z, which is kids ages 5 to 24. And the things that people are saying already that are going to come out of this, the types of ways that it's going to impact this generation. I think it's really exciting and invigorating what might come out of the pandemic for this generation of kids. And so I'm keeping my eye on them because I think that even though they've gotten behind on things, they're going to shoot forward. I really do believe that because of these challenges that they've been through. So I'm extra motivated to get to know them and be inspired by them because of that.
Here to what Julie said, as far as PTA and community councils, they do a fantastic job. I was able to attend Music Man at Kearns High School, and they did an amazing job with that. They put it together in a short, I think 4 weeks, and did a phenomenal job. I was so impressed. Also, the musical review and melodrama at Cottonwood High School. It was really fun to go see that. They actually ended up delaying that a little bit because they had a couple COVID cases, or a couple quarantines, I shouldn't say COVID cases, but a couple quarantines. And so it was a relief for them to be able to do that. They chose to do it masked, but it was amazing to me to be able to hear, and I could hear them very clearly speak and everything that they did. So I was very impressed with that. It's been really interesting to hear at community councils, all the land trust plans that have been revised, and they're kind of going, okay, we have this money, we can't use it for this, or this. And so there's been some very vigorous debates on some of the things that they're trying to figure out, but that's a tough thing that they have to spend it down so much. But I am grateful that they are able to save some of that TSSA money for next year. So it's been really interesting to see that. Hats off to the PTAs that are all sponsoring the reading week this week. I know that we saw some of the creative things that are happening at the schools. And I know just them being creative in what they're doing to really get that to work. My husband and I both recorded a little Flipgrid. So if any parents have never used it, this was an introduction to Flipgrid, but we recorded a Flipgrid about our favorite book for the kids' class. But I just was so impressed that the teacher would reach out and do something like that to get the parents involved with that as well. So bravo to all those teachers who are being very creative with that. I got to go to Beehive Elementary and got to see their food pantry. It's brand new this year, and it's, gosh, the assistant principal has organized it, and she used to work at Walmart, so it was kind of like it's beautiful. But they just, I love to see that being used more. So anybody, pass that out to anybody who in that Kearns area that is in need. It's really, it's great. They have so much stuff there. And I wanted to just tell you all, South Kearns Elementary, I did get to go to theirs, and she had some really good data. As you say that, you saw the impact of those testing scores, Connie, when you look at, this year and everything, that I was really impressed that their all-day kindergarten, their test scores were actually right on target or above. So it really was impressive that, and they do use Title I money for that all-day kindergarten, but that was really impressive that they were able to keep that. So proud of that school for sure. And then just a really big thank you to Ben for doing that legislative tracker. I know that's a work, a lot of work for you, and we really appreciate, I appreciate being able to read it and see what's going on and kind of keep track of everything on the edge of my seat. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, that's actually on my list of just recognitions is Ben not only does the legislative tracker for us, but Ben and Martin are both highly active in testifying in committees, taking phone calls, trying to lobby and support our JLC, our Joint Legislative Committee. They take very active roles in that. Also want to give a shout out to Terry. I don't think you missed a meeting. And he's been a wonderful representative of our district on that and taken some good votes. And so we appreciate your service, Terry, for that too. There's only 3 days left. 3 days left of the legislative session. I'm counting. I have, last night I attended a concert at Granger High, a choir concert. This is actually the first choir concert they've done this year. And it went very well. And their numbers aren't super high right now, but hopefully they can build up their choir over the next couple years. But it was just so nice to be back in an auditorium, be back in a concert, be back hearing kids doing what they love to do. And so I was very grateful for that opportunity. Past couple weeks, I've had an absolute ball going and visiting some schools. I got to learn, or maybe relearn, about transverse angles, congruent supplementary angles as I worked with a small group of math kids at Kennedy Junior. I had to brush up. I had to use Google a lot to prepare. I was really grateful the teacher gave me a day's notice with the worksheet, so I didn't have to just be blank, just staring blankly. So, but it was so fun to work with those kids and see them engaged and excited in math. I was interviewed by a journalism class and it was just fun. I got to help in a science class. Then over at Valley, I got to kind of be on COVID detail. I got to go to lunch and make sure the kids were hand sanitized as they filed in. And then I got to walk around and talk with them and visit. How you doing? How you liking Valley? They all spoke very highly of their teachers. And then later on, I got to go to every classroom with my hand sanitizer spray bottle and the disinfectant spray for the desks and stuff. I got to replace bottles to the teachers' classrooms if they needed it. That was fun. Then Kearns Junior, I actually visited this morning, had a ball in a science class. I'm also relearning all about the systems in your body, circulatory, respiratory, how they work together, how to identify disease. And I was just observing in that class, but a couple things really stood out to me. It was the kids were all engaged. They were all on task. They were following the teacher. The teacher gave a wonderful lecture, set up a problem, and then let them work. And it was just, it just reminded me of how hard our teachers are working in the classroom, and they are succeeding. There are great lessons being planned. Students are being engaged and doing the work, and that just kind of warmed my heart. And that was, I think, Miss Brown's class. Later on, I got to go over to, after visiting kids at lunch, I got to go and help in an ESL class and helped this one particular student read and then go through words he missed and then read again and go through words he missed and then read again for the third time. And his fluency just in my short 15 minutes working one-on-one with him increased. And it just, the teacher's wonderful there too. Miss Bartholomew's class, I believe. So I love being in the schools. I was asked by the journalism class what my favorite part of my job is. And I said, I'm looking at them. You guys are, and visiting schools is just so fun. So I have 3 junior highs in my precinct. So now I'm on to my elementaries, which I'll be setting up shortly. So it's been I just tell the principals I'm coming for a couple hours and put me to work. And that's the only guidance I give them. So it's been fun. As a matter of business, our superintendent position closes on Friday at 5 p.m. So just want to make note of that. With that closing on March 5th, we will have need of an executive session a week from today. So we will be noticing that. The only thing on the agenda is the executive session for the purpose of character and competence. So no one really needs to come, but it will be noticed. And we will be starting that at 5:30. And that is all I have. Thanks, board, for all you do. Thanks for you guys for all you do. Happy to be here in Granite. And with that, I'll entertain a motion. Let's go home.
I motion that we adjourn.
I second.
There's a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, you guys.